Today's message will be a little unusual, in which I'm going to try to tap a few things. When I got the invite that said that I was going to speak for 2 hours and then possibly entertain a Q&A, I thought to myself, I must be reading this message wrong. Who in this day and age would want a sermon to be longer? When I heard the worship team, I want to give you some good news and some bad news. See, the language of heaven is music, which means those of us that speak for a living will be unemployed. Those of you who have always had to cut short your performance so the speaker can get up, you're going to be singing forever. I just want to give you the good news and the bad news. So if you feel speakers kind of cramp your style and reduce the music, when we get to heaven, you'll have the upper hand. But when I read that, I remembered Dr. W.A. Criswell, who was always miffed by this time sensitivity of preaching. That we've got to get done at a certain time so that we can get about our lives. God, I'm going to give you 2 hours if you're Pentecostal. I'm going to give you an hour if you're not. In fact, recently there was a revival in one of the cities in America, and the Methodist Church said, hey, we have 6 new families as a result of the revival. Now the Baptist said, we got 8. The Presbyterian said, we got rid of 6. So, each person works to their own tune. But W.A. Criswell was asked, this man taught an adult Sunday school class for 50 years. He was considered the Pope of the Southern Baptist Convention. The man could look at a Bible in Greek and preach in English. And when his Sunday school class said, Pastor, we have given you just about every gift the Christian bookstore has. We have honored you every which way we can think of. What would you like as a gift from your own heart? And Pastor W.A. Criswell said, for just once in my life, I want to preach till I'm finished. And the church agreed. So one Saturday afternoon, he started around 1 o'clock. He went 8 hours and preached the Messianic thread and connected Genesis to Revelation. We live in a world of busyness. We live in a world of hurriedness. And as a result of that, we give God a small part of our time. We think there is a Sunday identity and a Monday identity, but there is only one 24-hour God-given identity. So for those of you who can't stay, I encourage you to, but if something presses you, remember this. Don't ever bargain with God, you'll lose. Don't make a deal with Him today that is based on convenience. Make a decision today with Him that is made on conviction. I hope I will be able to keep you with thoughts that are engaging. I'm going to deal a little bit with the 23rd Psalm. Then I'm going to talk about a little bit from Matthew and maybe culminate from the book of Acts and try to create a messianic thread in some way. Now, I'm a lay person in that I've had ministry positions. I've been affiliated with some of the biggest and the best in the world. But I've never been to seminary, I've yet to go to cemetery. Somewhere between womb and tomb, God's placed a call on my heart. So what I will give you is not King James verbatim. I was raised a Brahmin in an Orthodox family in the southern part of India. I'm the only one from my family who follows the carpenter from Galilee. Most of what I have learned at the feet of masters. And so I'm going to make a statement to you that you're going to find shocking. I believe the Bible from Genesis to maps. And some of you are shocked. You're saying it ends at Revelation. No, all the problems we have in the world are about the maps. Nobody is arguing scripture. Everybody is arguing geography. God, what did He say? He said the word has to go across the world to all of the Gentiles before the veil is lifted over Jerusalem, and I will come to rule again. Amen. So when we look at this, I want you to just keep those any prejudices you have, any blinders you have about how to receive information, just switch them off. In fact, today, for the first time in your life, I want you to look at this God in total humility. Which means when you serve today, I want you to bend so low that you can't see the person you're serving, so the person sees over you and the Christ you are representing. Okay, I want you to have that kind of image of servanthood. So let's take some threads here and try to mesh them together. There are 3 reasons for obedience. Partial obedience is disobedience, by the way. But there are 3 basic reasons for obedience. A slave obeys because he has to. An employee obeys because he needs to, but a loving son obeys because he wants to. Your Heavenly Father has a relationship with you that is very humbling. The God of the universe, the creator in the majesty of all of the splendor of his creation, does not need you, he wants you. That's humbling. And most of us want God on our board of directors, but only in an advisory capacity. Someone asked me one time, how do I know it's from God? I said, when you put your head on the pillow at night and you sleep sweet, beautiful dreams, it is from God. If you find yourself awake all night convincing God it should be from him, it's probably not. Adrian Rogers put it this way, if you don't feel the devil, you're probably walking in the same direction. And sometimes we blame the devil for a lot of things we do. There was this one pastor's wife who was buying some expensive clothes. And the pastor walked up to her and said, you're giving us a bad name in church because every Sunday you wear a new outfit and they think they pay me too much. So she said, what do I do? He says, follow the Bible. Next time, she says, when I go into the shopping center, the dress just calls out to me. So he says, do what's biblical. Say, get thee behind me, Satan. Well, the next Sunday she's wearing another stunning outfit. And he says, what? You can't even follow simple biblical instructions. She says, no, I followed it. I looked at the dress and I said, get thee behind me, Satan. And Satan said, it fits well from behind me. We can convince ourselves to bargain with God, but God does not bargain.
Yes.
See, being born in an Orthodox Brahmin family in Andhra Pradesh, where my father's uncles' names are engraved on temple stones. This is the God who called me to now represent him, and I have shared his message of hope in 66 countries on 6 continents. And my father told me I was a curse on the family. Yet last week in Vizag, I was speaking at a church and my dad was in the front row. See, we recently lost my mom in February, so my dad's been itinerating with me. And I'll share maybe a little bit about what God did at my mom's funeral. That was so amazing. But at that church, they introduced my father, the octogenarian who received his PhD at the age of 83. And they wanted him to say some words before I got up and delivered the message. And my father stood up and said, if I take any more time talking about myself, I will deprive myself of learning from my son. He's my hero. Folks, many of us will live lives of quiet desperation. Many of us will live lives of quiet desperation, waiting for accolades from our Heavenly Father, and will go through our entire existence not having served our earthly one. Tony Evans says we are so desperate to share a heaven we cannot prove. Well, we definitely can exhibit the hell we experience. Let's look at the present continuous. What does God want from you? What is His ordained obedience from you? What is His requisite requirement so that you and I could be good at it? Now folks, let me explain something very fundamental. And again, I'm about as a layperson as they get. In fact, Sam Kamalesan, that outstanding preacher, said, hermeneutics is the discipline in a seminary where they take someone who enrolls with the joy of a message in his heart and gives him structure and then take all the joy out of preaching. So I preach from the gut. For the simple reason that I have seen this orchestrated change globally. But when I look at the obedience, I look at the two competing factors that you and I get confused as everyday people. First is the Great Commandment, the other is the Great Commission. The Great Commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. 1A, 1B. Dwindled down from the 60 plus of Isaiah, Christ brought it down to 1A and 1B. On this, He said, hangs the laws of the prophets. The Great Commission is make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. See, if you just go out to do the Great Commission and you don't love, you're irritating. If you just go love and don't tell them who sent you, you're an NGO. But you have to be the Great Commission and the Great Commandment that are on two rails. And you become the bridge between the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. Imagine a railway track And if you try to walk on the track by yourself, you can go maybe 10 paces. But if you have a friend on the other rail, you can go quite a distance. The Great Commission and the Great Commandment are not mutually exclusive. You have to learn to love. What you have done to the least of me, said Mother Teresa, a favorite verse from Matthew. Somewhere along the line, Christians started walking around with long faces and short pocketbooks. Most of them look like the cruise director for the Titanic. You know, like someone's licked all the red off their candy. And we're the only ones who know how it ends. Why would it? See, the Jesus in you needs to find the Jesus in them. That's obedience. That's it. Then only then will John 3:16 stay. So I want you to use those anchor points, Great Commission, Great Commandment. I want you to use the obedience commandment, and then let's move forward. My first explanation will come from the 23rd Psalm, and let's take a journey through it in a way you probably have not heard it before. Alright? The first verse of the 23rd Psalm, which all of us have memorized, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Here I want you to write down the word riches. Riches. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. A personal proclamation. See, the shepherd knows his sheep by name. When the shepherd goes through the gate is narrow and the sheep will follow. So when God says, the Lord is my shepherd, He is saying, I know you by name. And the riches He gives, see, there is a difference between wealth and riches. Wealth is when your friends want to be with you. Riches is the eternal and heavenly sense, or when the God of all creation has a personal investment in you. Imago Dei, created in His image, given His mind. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I know most of us are, instead of going through life, instead of growing through life, being humbly grateful, we go through life being grumbly hateful. Because what we say is, Lord, I don't want all of the land, just what's next to mine. What we are saying is, my desires cannot have any fences. That's why Huxley said, I want my life to have no purpose, because then I can continue to participate in my own erotic dysfunction. This mind, Imago Dei, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, created in His image, given His identity, it should be so somber. What frustrates me most is we as a species of people, and I'm talking about believers in the gospel of Jesus Christ, are the weirdest of all on the planet. We're the only ones who crucify our living, worship our dead, and shoot our wounded. We take no prisoners. Peter Kreeft said, modern Christian hypocrisy is the price vice pays to virtue. Vice is bad, virtue is good. So what do we go through life? Let me dumb it down. What we are saying is vice, bad. My bad is not as bad as your bad. So my bad must be good. The sanctification that comes with self-justification has an ugly word, self. Don't bargain with this fact, because the shepherd knows his sheep by name. When the shepherd rests the sheep at night, if you ever understood why the shepherd-sheep analogy is so prevalent, read about actually what happens in a shepherd and a sheep relationship. The shepherd at night, when he lays them down, if the sheep is restless, he will rub sulfur and some kind of liniment oil on the forehead to prevent the flies from swarming around the sheep, so that the sheep can have peace. That's why the devil is called Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. This Lord knows you by name. And He is professing David. Now think about David. In fact, this is my favorite analogy of a trip through the Bible. Everybody wonders, what can God do with me? Abraham was too old. Sarah laughed at God. Noah was drunk. Naomi was a widow. Rahab was a prostitute. Zacchaeus was too short. Timothy had an ulcer. Thomas was a great doubter. Peter was a great denier. Lazarus dead. And these are the characters he picked. And David, always they attach a man after God's own heart. On the balcony of boredom, on the veranda of voyeurism, this guy went down an escapade like none other in all of human history. I know many women who wouldn't soon forget a dude who did that. And yet this man is crying out. But what does David always say? I am constantly aware of your unfailing love. I am constantly aware of your unfailing love. Folks, there's nothing you can do that is good enough that will punch your ticket into heaven. There's nothing you can do that is bad enough that will keep you out. It's not up to you. The relationship that the shepherd has with the sheep is so special. Even if you run from God and you come back, you quickly realize he didn't move. You know, it is our own fragility, our huge, massive ego. And I don't like to, I'm invited all over the world because of how I connect the dots, but I was recently in a church and the pastor looked at me and he says, we're having some problems with the sheep. I said, what? He says, you know, they're not as committed. You know, we're trying to build a new building. I said, I'm just a salesman. You want me to take a crack at it? He said, sure. I said, it's all on how you present it. So I stood up and I said, ladies and gentlemen, I just had a conversation with your pastor and we were talking about the building program and he gave me the good news and the bad news. What do you want first? This is the good news. The good news is all the money for the building campaign has been raised. Oh man, they applauded. One guy in the front row said, what's the bad news? Apparently it's still with you. Only the pastor clapped. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Want is a huge word. Recently, I think one of my social media team put out something, and I think I compared the difference between want and need. We go through life thinking that everything we want is what we need, and it's not. You can make do with a lot less. We just don't. The next, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures, rest. So right off the bat, in the first verse, he gives you riches, because he is your shepherd. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Be still and know that I am Lord. He is the giver of comfort and the only one that can make a weary soul light. Annie Johnston Flint suffered from rheumatoid arthritis, died of ovarian cancer, spent a lot of time propped up by pillows in a bed where they just had to turn her every so often to try to alleviate some of the pain that came from the bed sores. Yet those of you who sing know she wrote some of the great hymns, most of which she pounded out with the knuckles of her hand that were clubbed almost into a fist with excruciating pain as she hammered them out on a typewriter. He giveth more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction, he addeth his mercy. To multiply trials, his multiplies speed. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed, the day is half done. When we've reached the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving has only begun. His love has no limit, His grace has no measure, His power has no boundary known unto man. For through His infinite riches in Jesus, He giveth and giveth and giveth again. No limit, no boundary through affliction. How can you think that this is the God of provision? One of the prophetic prayers was about healing. How can we believe that the God of the universe, and you're amidst this great pain? One of my good friends, is this thing just turning on its own? One of my good friends, suddenly you're like, okay, it's either the Holy Spirit saying hush, or all right, perfect, thank you. I told you I'm not musical. My third grade teacher told me not to even bother singing along with. My dad bought me a musical instrument. One time the neighbor came over and said, can you play something my dog doesn't know? So it was always setting it off into a cacophony. But when you look at this thing, so let's add one more component to this real quick, and then we'll try to. He leadeth me beside the still waters, relaxation. So first we have riches, then we have rest. Now within rest comes relaxation. You do not have ulcers because of what you're eating. You have ulcers because of what's eating you. Conceit is a weird disease. It affects everybody except the person who has it. Have you ever noticed some people will brighten up the room by leaving? You know, they're so narrow-minded they look through a keyhole with both eyes. They go around trying to find fault like there's a reward for it. These are the bearers of bad news. When you see them, run. And you know who they are. These are the negative Nells of the world. For them the sky is falling. It's always Chicken Little syndrome. And I grew up in India. India, in fact, recently in India Today, in January issue, there was a happiness quotient, and India rated near the very bottom in happiness. And there were many reasons given. But one of the guys who was quoted in there, and I'll leave this, you can go read the article and you'll find out who he was. But he's the head of mental health for a major hospital, and he said most of his days he's upset and annoyed and angry. And this guy's the head of mental health. See, we are a shame culture, and we're a blame culture, and constantly negative. My late mother was a person who I loved and adored, but she had just a negative streak in her that was part of her upbringing. I remember when I wrote my first book. I said, I just wrote my first book. She said, Ayo, the popular South Indian word Ayo, it's not all inclusive. Oxford has actually now attributed it as an applicable part of vocabulary. So she says, Ayo, don't tell anybody you have bad luck. I said, Amma, you don't tell anybody when you read a lousy book. You tell everybody when you write a good one. I'm saying that in my own defense. My next book is on modesty. Right? I'm working through it. But that negative nature. I grew up in India. Shame culture. I graduated always in that half of the class that made the top half possible. And it's constant comparison. And what we find here, if you want relaxation in your spirituality, do not compete, complete.
Yes. Yes.
If you compete, you're talking about different identities. 7.2 billion people on planet Earth, only one you. If you're married, your spouse is saying, thank God. Someone asked me, what do I give marriage advice? Very little. The only thing I know that is for a fact is, someone asked me, how often should I tell my wife I love her? I said, before somebody else does. That's why they say marriage is grand, divorce 100 grand. Okay, so how can you get this relaxation? How do you get the comfort? Hear me carefully if you hear nothing else I say today. Happiness. It depends on happenings. But joy is undiluted, it's unadulterated, it's pure. Fred Smith Sr. said joy is adequate. Do you have joy in your life, or are you trying to go through event-based? We're quickly copying the West. India imports everything lousy in terms of habits from the West and exports all the good. And it's ironic because I lived in the West now for 30 plus years, and all the bad habits are here. It's almost like we are a magnet for ignorance. And there's no rest. There's only restlessness. This constant craving to try to prove something. We borrow money that we don't have, to buy things that we don't need, to impress people we don't like, to become someone we can't recognize. And the moment someone gets a new... See, when I was growing up, my father would always, my brother's an engineer. I'm from Andhra. What does my father want me to be? Doctor. There are only two things I absolutely am sure, and I wrote a book called From Abstracts to Absolutes. I'm not sure of very many things, but there are two things I'm absolutely sure of. I hate blood and I hate sick people. I'd make a lousy doctor. Well, I'll motivate you, you'll still die. So I ran out of the MBBS exam. Father dropped me one side, I ran out of the other side. I don't want to be a doctor. Then I found out later on the secret. Apparently in Andhra, if you get an engineering degree and come home, you get 1 acre of coconut plantation in Delaware. Wow. If you do a doctorate, you come back, you get 2 acres of coconut plantation. If you mess up and do an MBA like me, you bring the coconut and work in the plantation. So needless to say, when my father introduced my brother, he introduced it. The reason I share that is I grew up with that self-image. And when I met Christ, at that crossroads in October of 1993, in a foreign country, in a foreign church, with a foreign pastor, and everything that was alien to me, my father told me I was a curse on the family. But the weight of the world was no longer on my shoulders, and I turned around to my dad and I said, Dad, I have a unique kind of relaxation now. You can hate me, but I worship a God who through me will outlove you.
Amen.
Through me will outlove you. Case in point, a week ago, when my father stands up and says, this is the kid I listen to. Now the reason I'm sharing, and I always talk to personal anecdote, because biblically also it's accurate, through parable kati them, without parable kati them not. Unless you're revealing through story, your testimony really holds no water. They can't see what you feel, they can't experience what you experience. You're walking around grinning from ear to ear like you've eaten a banana sideways, you look like a lunatic. On most days you're not solving anybody's problems and you're probably irritating. Especially when you're cutting in and out of traffic and behind it says, Jesus saves. So that's why in America we have a sticker now. It says, honk if you love Jesus. Text if you want to meet him. So sometimes we need to make sure that we don't get so carried away. It's like, my Lord will provide. Well, try that in front of a lorry. Horn, please. You're done. All right? So, just recapping where we were. The Lord is my shepherd, riches. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, rest. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Can you trust Him to lead you to being of a mind that is fresh and a body that is eager? There is a comfort in the assurance of Calvary that allows God to be the one that guides us into hope. Relaxation. He leadeth me, He restoreth my soul, rejuvenation. E. Stanley Jones, pioneering missionary to India. Stanley Jones wrote the epic book, 1925 international bestseller called Christ of the Indian Road. Stanley Jones was the one who actually communicated with Mahatma Gandhi. It was his communication to Mahatma Gandhi that resulted in Mahatma Gandhi's letter back to Stanley Jones that he included in this book. How do you get rejuvenated with this gospel? Stanley Jones said, every day you wake up, it has to be true. Every day you wake up, it has to be new. There has to be something in the pages that comes alive. And every day you wake up, it has to be you. And then he added the 4 things, because Stanley Jones asked Mahatma Gandhi, what does Christianity have to do to be an accepted life in India and not a white man's import that brings about hate? And Gandhi said 4 things. First, live like him. See, Amy Carmichael, who lived in India for 50 years, said, we all profess to be strangers and pilgrims in search of a land we can call our own, and then settle in the most unstranger-like fashion, exactly as if we were at home and intended to stay as long as we could. I don't believe apostolic miracles have died. Apostolic living surely has. I've been an itinerant for 25 years. I spend 120 nights a year in a hotel room. I do about 300,000 miles a year in the air. I know what she's talking about. There is always the comfort of convenience. If you want a rejuvenated soul, live like Him. Second, love like Him. It was central to His nature. Love like Him. See, there's a difference between wearing a WWJD bracelet. You're an accessorizing Christian. But if you cross the road and pick up the person who's in the ditch after 3 people of holy nature already passed him by, and take him and leave him at the inn and say, I'm going to pay for him, and if you have anything due on my way back, I'll clear the tab. That's loving like Him. What you've done to the least of me. When Mother Teresa was in Yemen, she was taken to where all the lepers were, and when she looked at that, she says, Jesus, how could we have left you like this? And the Yemeni government said, what do you mean? And she says, no, I see God in each of them. Well, these are outcasts, disfigured, nubs where hands used to be, disfigurement in terms of color, pigmentation, face ravaged. living in absolute drudgery on the outskirts of town because humanity has refused to now claim them just because a virus ate them. And she said, how could we have left you like this? And the Yemeni government said, what can you do? She said, I won't do anything, I'm quite busy, but I can send a couple of sisters here to take care of this. This is what they're trying to do. So what will you need from us? Well, just a building. And maybe a corner of that building, a place carved out where they can meditate. And the Yemeni government said, and your sisters will come and take care of these people? She said, absolutely. It's curable now. You know what the Yemeni government indirectly did? They built her a church. This is the seedbed of modern day terrorism. This is where everything radical in the world begins. And they built this lady, the saint from the gutters of Calcutta, a church. Live like him, love like him, and watch the walls fall. Third, understand other worldviews. Earlier it was mentioned that I work with RCIM and we're primarily known as an apologetics ministry. What is apologetics? See, evangelism is leading with your heart because you feel that they need to feel what you feel. Apologetics is leading with your mind because you need to convince them that you are a rational believer. John Stott said evangelism and apologetics are two sides of the same coin. They're not at odds with each other. They actually complement each other. Most of us cannot explain why we believe. That's the brilliance of faith. But when you get into the comparison of what others believe and understanding other worldviews, you will begin to understand that the Word of God does not return void. But most people are afraid to open another worldview because they're afraid it will sabotage their own. And if it did, shame on you. You're obviously, your Bible didn't do enough for you. There again, there were two men of the cloth, and they were evangelists. And their wives had gotten together. And the first one said, my husband's having a horrible time on the field. There are no funds. There's no people coming to the meetings. There's constant threat. There's no food in the house. The kids are not enjoying themselves. Life is tough following this God. The second evangelist, both of them were mending their husband's pants, by the way, at that time. And the second one said, oh, we're having the time of our lives. God is working wonders. Healing is taking place. Restoration is coming to the land. There is great revival going on. See, the picture then focuses on what they were mending. The first one was mending the seat of her husband's pants. The other one was patching the knees.
Amen. Yes.
Unless you understand this dynamic, don't just go through it, grow through it. Live like him. Love like him. Understand other worldviews and don't water down your own. This is fascinating. I see a lot of youngsters here. I was speaking in Chicago some time back and for a youth cohort of something. They started something for the kids. And I said, why do we need another program for kids? And one of the kids said, well, to make the gospel relevant for our generation. I said, I'm an old fuddy-duddy, and some of you are probably wondering how old I am. I just recently celebrated the 36th anniversary of my 20th birthday. So I'm just a young man, but I have really old hair. But I asked that little question. I said, in which generation was it not relevant? Folks, worship is for God, not for you. This is where you come out and cry out to Him in adoration. The heart as a muscle will pump blood and be a circulatory system engineer. But a heart that does not know how to love and does not know how to be loved actually fails at its primal creative purpose. This adoration for God. And Rabbi Zacharias puts it brilliantly when he says, when you look at the Genesis account of worship, first the people had to be redeemed. They had to be taken out of Egypt where they had been slaves and in bondage for thousands of years, and then they had to go through that 40-year wandering, a journey that today would take about 11 days. And people always say, maybe Moses didn't have GPS, or maybe the, men were driving, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The reason for 40 years, one biblical generation, is all the grumblers and the moaners were going to be killed off. First came redemption. Only then came righteousness when Moses went up and brought the tablets down. After they were redeemed and made righteous, were they given the specs for the tabernacle for worship. We do it backwards. We first build the tabernacle. Then we tell them, these are our laws of righteousness, now go get redeemed. It fails. Again, like I said, it's not good, didn't get on. I just report the facts. And sometimes facts are troubling. They really are. It's because we have a convoluted way of saying this word relevant. If relevance was an integral part of the Bible, none of us would be saved. For God so loved the world, where does it say relevant world? Charles Spurgeon preached to 6,000 people at a time without PowerPoint and a fog machine. And he got convinced pretty much that you can save people without PowerPoint. I use PowerPoint. Today they asked me, are you going to use PowerPoint? I said, no, today I'm just going to make my point with PowerPoint to the PowerPoint. But Spurgeon preached his heart out. I love one of his sayings, I paraphrase it. He said, when talking about the joy of heaven, let every fiber in your being radiate and warm. When talking about hell, use your normal face. It's fascinating to me that we confuse worship with relevance. We want to attract a certain kind of crowd. I understand all that. I've been in churches from all walks of life. But let me give you an illustration of where I found the rejuvenation. I was invited to preach in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I was there for a corporate event, that's my primary gig. So someone had paid a lot of money to have me come and do a motivational speech or a strategic lecture or something with a Hilton in KL. And this one pastor found out I was going to be there. So a little before the social media of our time, so he found out through a friend. He says, do you think he'd be willing to come and preach in my church? My friend said, go, this is a good man. I agreed. Well, as soon as I got into the car, I'm a big guy. Anytime you have to fold me to put me into a car, that's not fun for me. It's just generally not how that's why I drive a big car. Otherwise walk. But why would you convince yourself to cramp yourself and fit yourself into a glove box? Just walk. As soon as I got into that really dinky car, I said, man, if I ever get my breath back, because my knees are now digging into my neck, maybe I'll be able to preach. And I'm grumbly hateful. So the city is now receding back. How far is this church? I forgot to ask him. He said, oh, it's just about an hour. Which in Malaysia is about an hour. In India, an hour means 19 years. Okay, so you never reach. So I live in America where you drive on the right side of the road. I've been in England where you drive on the left side of the road. And India also, you drive on the left side. What's left? So, but when I came to this church, my heart broke. I realized what a hypocrite I've been. The great messenger of God, the orator who can recite poetry, is now at odds. Because this guy is walking me up the rickety stairs of a building that's a karaoke bar. The only place he can get a license for a Sunday morning. On the condition that his wife sweep up the debris and the filth from the previous night's refuse. So when I walked in, the pastor's wife is clearing the beer bottles and the cigarette butts. His daughter is playing keyboard. The son is vocals. He's just come home from Bible school in New Zealand. The congregation had blue chairs. I'll never forget. Say it like this, but blue chairs. About 16 of them. And 11 came that day. To add it all, he says, oh, I forgot to tell you, we're a Tamilian congregation. So I have to translate for you. And the moment you say you're going to translate for me, it takes me out of my game. I have to change the way I do things because, obviously he doesn't know the poetry. He's not going to do any of that stuff. And I'm going to grumbling hateful. Word of God messed up by a messed up messenger. Totally out of my league. And there was this one lady, she would not let go of her gaze on my face. I went left, she followed me. I went right, she followed me. But she can't understand a thing I'm saying because she's listening to this dude. See, I'm relevant. I can talk to millennials. I can say dude. But that's the extent of my knowledge. When I finished, she was waiting for me in the parking lot. With what I can only describe. See, I grew up quite poor. My father studied under a streetlight to graduate from college. My mother was a child bride. I wore hand-me-downs. There was a time in my life when my mother's saris were made into 3 shirts for brother, myself, and my dad. I know what it's like. But this lady was wearing third-me-downs, which means hand-me-downs would be a step up from her. They were pish-pash. And she handed me an envelope. And only people in India would understand this envelope. It's the one made from brown paper that we made with Scotch tape at home. Because somehow it's too expensive to go to the store and buy a real envelope, but we'll spend 6 hours making that, which is completely out of shape. In the envelope, she said, I'm supposed to take care of my preachers and teachers. I didn't even dare open the envelope. I went back to my nice hotel room at the Hilton in Kuala Lumpur and I opened it. It was the equivalent of $6 US, a week's wages for her, widow's money. Rejuvenation. In your walk, what rejuvenates you? Look at the words. He restoreth my soul. We think restoration of the soul is a great cleansing. No, restoration of a soul is a great awakening. C.S. Lewis said, we are not human beings with a soul, we are a soul. It's a great awakening, it's an enlightenment. And it's not all going to happen the same way. Okay? Mr. Ziegler, my mentor, used to say, don't have a boring funeral where people are standing up there all somber and crying and then they put the casket lid on and they lower you in and then ashes to ash and all that. He says, let them leave a little gap there. Come sliding in and say, wow, what a ride. I remember his memorial service. While the sermon was going on, the pastor stood up and he says, oh, by the way, here's the letter Zig Ziglar wrote to me 10 years ago scripting his memorial service. Each of you has received an invitation card to follow this Jesus that Zig Ziglar did. At the end of the service, we'll collect those cards. If any of you want to make it at the funeral, they were giving an invitation to follow this Christ. That's rejuvenation of the soul. Because everybody's sitting in the pew saying, man, I didn't do that. Well, right as the service finished, Mr. Z comes onto the big screen. This video he had recorded 3 years earlier because he died of Alzheimer's. So in a lucid moment 3 years earlier, he went into a studio and said, this is what I want you to play at the end of my memorial service. And he comes onto the screen, larger than life. He says, I'm really glad that you're enjoying the fact that you're celebrating my life. I hope you had a good time. All of you should have received a little card to talk about following this Jesus that I love and now have seen. Please fill it out, because when you get here, after you can hug him, you can come and find me. All eternity is beautiful. This man was selling from beyond. So, when I left the United States to come to India, I lost my very dear friend Danny after 4.5 years of brain cancer. Danny and I had a very unique bond. He would grab me by my head and kiss me on my neck, and we just developed as brothers from a different mother. But I walked the last 4 years with him. And Danny said, Krish, I want you to preach my funeral. I said, why? He said, you're the only one who I've attended funerals where you give the invitation. If we're going to celebrate a life of someone who has found eternity, why not offer it to the ones who are crying for him now? Well, unfortunately, Danny died, and they said, when are you leaving for India? He died on Saturday, I was leaving on Monday, there was not enough time to prepare. Well, my heart skipped a beat when about a week ago I got an email from Becca, his bride. She said, Krish, Danny loved you dearly, and he made it an adamant in his final wishes that you speak at his funeral. So we've finished all the burial services and all. But we're holding the memorial service on the 5th of May, so you can preach. I want to ask you this question. What will that do to your soul? That someone in another country that you went to as a stranger is holding up the memorial service so that you can come and give an invitation so they can meet the God they love. See, that's what he means when he says, he restoreth my soul. Then he leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Very interesting word, his name's sake. Nobody cares that you follow him. Because if the harvest is plenty, the laborers are few is one. When you look at the parable of the vineyard, or you look at the parable of whichever parable you look at, the harvest is his, the labor is his, the laborers are his, the work is his, and the reward is his. You technically don't exist. And if you missed a day, write this down if you're writing something. The universe does not suffocate because you hold your breath. See, 80% of the people in this world do not care that you have a problem. The other 20% really happy it's you. So 100% don't give a flip at the end of the day. You got to get over it. The best way to get off your high horse is to realize he came in on a donkey. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking less often of yourself. Get over it. Our feelings are always hurt. We walk around, with this little walking on eggshells. Every church I've ever went to is started by 3 people who disagreed with the previous church. Recently in Dallas, I was speaking for an association. Believe it or not, it was a Malu association. But this is a funny Malu association. It's the Federation of Malayali Associations of Associations. So they got an association for all the other associations. And I stood up and I said, when does it stop? When do we stop congregating? And then I realized, none of us have been taught to believe we belong. So we clamor. See, success is not who you are in relation to the person sitting next to you. Success is who you are in relation to where you began and what you began with. Success is not a journey, it's a destination. In fact, I articulate it this way. I said success is not looking at the isms and schisms that prevent you. Success is not looking at the isms and schisms that prevent you. Success is going to where success is and hoping by sheer centripetal force you're sucked in. Sometimes it's okay to be an eager spectator. Not for too long. Any of you watch any of these IPL games live? Some of you do? Yeah, see, the spectator sport craze in India and global is actually a microcosm of life. 70,000 people desperately in need of exercise, constantly yelling, and 22 people desperately need a rest. Life is not a spectator sport, it is a participator sport. You were not designed to be an audience, you were designed to enjoy it. And he feels this joy with you. Lead me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. God corrects you when he claims you because you are not hurting yourself but him who claimed you. You are an ambassador for the kingdom. Maybe sometimes I would rather say I'm a follower of Jesus of Nazareth or a believer. See, I don't say you're a Christian, the word may be toxic. But in Jeremiah 1 it says, long before you came as forth, before you were in your mother's womb, I anointed you a prophet to the nations. 1:5 I think. But what is it he's saying? He's saying, you're an ambassador, regal in heritage, royal in your seal. When people say, who are you? I'm an ambassador. Because you are an ambassador for another kingdom. But having that identity, having that, because it's his name's sake. So who can follow this Christ? We'll talk about that when we come back. I'll do a few more things here. Let me just do one more. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Write down the word responsibility there, if you're following with me. And then I'll cover all of them at the end, so you'll have all the R's there together. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me. Reliance. In Ephesians 6:10, we are asked to rely on his power and might. Reliance on God gives you a faith that grows, a faith that knows, and a faith that shows. A faith that grows, a faith that knows, and a faith that shows. Ladies and gentlemen, meekness is not weakness.
Yes.
Meekness is not weakness. You can be humble for this gospel. When I met Mother Teresa, when she held my hand, she said, where are you from? I said, America. She said, I don't like Clinton. And for the first time in my life, I really believe she was divine. Because I don't like her either. At least we're on the same side. But the reason I say that is interesting. Here is a Nobel laureate. The saint of Calcutta. Now Saint Mother Teresa. In fact, I have her signature. It was only $484 on eBay when it was Mother Teresa. It's $3,000 now because she's a saint. I just checked, it's part of my son's inheritance. I mean, I'm human after all. But when she held my hand, the first words out of her mouth is, I don't like Clinton. Why? Why would I care if you don't like an American president? Her virtue was so deep, it was because the Democratic Party in the United States and abortion, that was her only cause. But she hated that word associated, not the person. How deep is your conviction? When you look at this word, He leadeth me in the paths of right. Yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me. Reliance. That reliance is what is your non-negotiable. That when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you know He's with you because you did not compromise. What is your non-negotiable? At what point will you say, I'm not going to do it? Yesterday I spoke to some folks in Delhi who are fairly high-end people, bureaucrats and all that, and I got that question. The question was on integrity. Where do you draw the line? It's interesting. Man is now deciding where morality begins and ends because we have jettisoned God's moral law and Him as a moral lawgiver. So we're debating. Hey, what do you think of integrity? Well, last time I checked, they were the 10 Commandments. They were not the 10 suggestions. And someone said, well, it's all relative. No, what that person means is I have lousy relatives. Everything is not relative. A girl will never tell you, I think I'm relatively pregnant. 9 months from now, she's in for a relative surprise. Some things are right, some things are wrong. Some things are yes, some things are no. Some things are black, some things are white. Some things are good, some things are bad. And when this relativism, this whole postmodern construct that came in, man beginning to redefine. In fact, go back to the 1930s. Sex and the Culture was a book written by Joseph D. Unwin. Groundbreaking study at that time. And actually Aldous Huxley, who was a guy who was just crazy as a coot, this guy basically said it was one of the most seminal works of that time. Joseph D. Unwin, British anthropologist, he studied 80 civilizations and 6 primary cultures dating back to Greece and Mesopotamia. And in the 30s he came up with this book called Sex and the Culture, and he said, any culture that designs or decides to redefine morality, intrinsic God-given world, within 4 generations will cease to be a superpower. And America right now, which he was actually pointing out, is about close to 3 generations post-Vietnam, where its cultural soul came home in a body bag. We have jettisoned absolutes and embraced abstracts. In Telugu we have a saying, Anta Maya, it's all an illusion. Tell that, you know that. Now in the great by and by, it does not adjust. Law is law for a reason. They don't call it a suggestion. And it's very fundamental. That's why William Blake put it this way. He said, this eyes dim windows of the soul distorts the heavens from pole to pole and goads us to believe a lie when we see with and not through the eye. We're supposed to see through the eye with a conscience, not with the eye devoid of one. You can't make up stuff. One time I was speaking in a forum in North Carolina and the guy stood up, he says, well, I really enjoy your talk, bud. You know, and every time I say, I enjoy your talk, bud, big bud coming. I always think to myself, you know, some people are so shallow I can spot them in the deep. Okay? Because they're just such dead giveaways. He said, I'm an atheist. How proud they are to say that. I said, well, I'll pray for you. He says, you don't understand, I'm an atheist. I said, well, it shouldn't bother you if my God doesn't answer. What is your problem? See, atheism, that's ego. At least tell me you're agnostic. I don't know what to believe. But how can you be absolutely sure there are no absolutes? That is an idiotic statement. Forget my, like I said, I didn't go to seminary. There's no word for idiot. It's idiot. And you notice people have to act like a buffoon. One day they'll wake up and say, today is the day I'm going to go out in public and open a nice big can of stupid. And some of them, have you ever noticed people with nothing to do want to do it with you? We all have things to do. I mean, some people should not be allowed to breathe. Unfortunately, we allow these people to breathe. They're taking your precious oxygen now, but they're bringing other people in who are just going to completely suck the world out of oxygen. Ignorance is not a medal. We should stop wearing it. Right is right, wrong is wrong, good is good, bad is bad. When did we go off in this whole thing? See, when I got a bad grade home, my father's board of education would meet my seat of learning, and I would stop doing it. The choice was very limited. Today, some of your parents fascinate me. You send them to time out to their room so they can be with their nice device. Oh, let me get this straight. You're not paying any attention to me, so I want you to go to your room and just be with your gadgets. Now that'll show you. My dad wouldn't even think of time out. If my dad raised his eyebrows, I left the zip code. He didn't have to say very much. In fact, my dad occasionally will remind me, he says, do you remember November 8, 1968? That was the last time my dad physically laid his hand on me. I'll remember the date till the day I die. I said something insulting to my mother, and my dad looked at me and he said, that's a non-negotiable. You'll make many mistakes, many of them will be yours, but that's my woman. I think all women have benefited with that respect since that beating. But the reason I share this is, when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. What is your reliance? On what do you rely? Where do you get this power from? So I'm looking right now at 11:30. I'm going to take my break here. We'll pause for the cause, 20 minutes, for those of you that think that this is about the worst hour I've ever spent. This is the time where you can quietly convince Pastor that you've had a prior engagement. That you somehow remember right now, but that's okay. So, all right. So we'll take that break, and I'll be glad to meet a few of you, and then